We're almost there. Good day? Great day? Awesome. Cool. I appreciate it, guys. So when Mikus Kins told me that I was going to be responsible for the Boston Spotlight 18 months ago, I tried to apply some good business advice I've heard over the years, which is you always start with the end in mind. And as I thought about what did we want to end the day on, we wanted someone who could come in and speak to American business, Latvian business, someone who is on the cutting edge of some of the most successful, dynamic, and largest companies in Latvia, someone who could speak to how to be successful in business as he's seen it develop over the past 30 years and hopefully over the next 30. And frankly, there was one name that came to mind, and it is my utter thrill and honor to be able to invite him up here today. I'm not going to give you any of his own biography. He's going to be able to speak to it a heck of a lot better than I can, but I would like us to welcome Nils Melngailis, who's also a son of Boston.
So quite remarkable to be back here speaking in Boston. Thank you for the introduction, Lotus. I was just thinking through that I've spent exactly half of my life here and exactly half of my life in Latvia as of this year. 30 years ago, I founded Coopers & Lybrand, which eventually became PwC. And I was just thinking, I just got the invitation to the 30-year anniversary the other day. And, made me think through a lot of things, and it's also always good to have an opportunity to reflect on where Latvia is today and why people should invest there and why I'm so passionate about it myself. But I wasn't as successful as Lotus, actually, in the beginning. My first foray into Latvia was in 1991. I tried to organize a conference very much like this. But I did it in January 1991. I couldn't wait for Latvia to be independent, so I thought I'd start dragging investors over there before that, in anticipation of it. And I was studying at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, which is quite close by. I grew up a few miles from here, so I really feel at home in a number of ways, but when I worked with a professor to bring investors over, and I founded a company called Baltic Ventures with a fellow named Zintars Kalniņš. Some of you might know him. He lives in Latvia now, but we did bring some investors over there, and this was, for those of you who might know what happened in January 1991, I organized the conference exactly the day before tanks started running over people in Lithuania. I remember, like Lotus, but not as successful as you. I didn't, I had 5 investors, not a full room. But and I recall trying to keep them away from the TV where they were showing what was happening in Vilnius when we were in the bar. But needless to say, we had Shell, we had Merck, an insurance company. Some of them remained interested in the country, but it's it was sort of an auspicious start for my career in Latvia, and I went. Just press this. Yeah. The conference didn't lead to any investment. I mean, the investors made it out safely. I stayed for a month because it was the time of the barricades, and I think that's probably the first time, clearly, I was directly exposed to how passionate, dedicated, committed the Latvian people are when things are, when everything's on the line. People are really committed, patriotic, will do anything to succeed, and will fight for their independence. And I found that consistently, professionally as well, when I've been working with different companies throughout my career in Latvia, beginning with Coopers & Lybrand and PwC, looking through how the legislative framework was developed over the time. I won't go into the accession to the different organizations that was spoken about earlier today. Clearly, Latvia is very methodically strategically, no matter what kind of political infighting happened in between, has always, been very focused on reaching the objective of ensuring independence and ultimately prosperity for the country. And there are just a couple of aspects. We spoke a bit about today about how people are very really high skilled, very the work ethic is very strong. One interesting aspect in the reason I'm mentioning the legal and accounting profession here is because that's also an extremely important profession for any investors going into a market to understand where they're investing. And what we did in Coopers and Lybrand back then, we were the first ones to send a number of our students. We actually hired twice as many people as we needed because we had the foresight to train people, get them UK qualifications in accounting, and then bring them back. And we essentially became, one of the stronger centers, stronger than Scandinavia in some sense, in terms of accounting and auditing traditions. And I think the legal profession is the same way. And I think that in itself, of course, leads to better legislation. It also leads to more assurance from investors, more confidence going in. And I think that's the case today as well. Also diversity back then in Latvia. When we were recruiting people, most men were, if you're a real man, you're an engineer, not someone who studies finance like me, right? And in Latvia, it was women who were the chief economists in companies, and we ended up recruiting mostly women. I think we had a majority of women in the Big Four. And if I'm not mistaken, all the Big Four managing partners now are the women that we hired back then. So if not 3 out of 4, I think. So it's, the diversity was built into the industry, and I think it's, a testament again to how dynamic the environment is, how hardworking people are, and how successful they can become when they're focused. The other elements, I think we talked a lot about how stable the environment is from a security point of view. I think one of the biggest challenges Latvia and the Baltics faced over the last 30 years is really ensuring that there's a very strong reputation. What are the authorities doing to ensure that they're fighting corruption, they're fighting financial crime? I think the response to the banking crisis in 2008 was quite remarkable. The Baltic economy is overheated. Latvia was first and foremost, lending too much, lending too easily. Prices of real estate went up extraordinarily fast. People got over-leveraged quite quickly, and then it all came crashing down. Mostly, Latvia, the same thing happened in Ireland at the time. But unlike many other European countries, the government reacted very quickly. Of course, the IMF had to come in and help bail the country out. That's when I was appointed to run Parex Bank, which was the bank that collapsed at the time. But the response was really, truly remarkable. It was a very difficult time because it involved austerity. People had to do with less. But it was there was a lot of fear that at the time there would be protests. People would not accept the austerity, that they would fight against it. Since I restructured Parex, which took about 2 years, I spent the next 8 years traveling around Europe fixing broken banks and broken banking systems, including in Greece, for example. The Baltic market, and Latvia in particular in this case, is much more ready to do what it takes to resolve issues than many other European countries. In Greece, they're still suffering, from banks having too many bad loans, and because of fear of populism. Well, populism in politics over many years, it's much better now. But let's say when there was a party called Syriza, which was in power after during the crisis, nothing was done to fix the banking system. People just avoided fixing the problem. The banks became zombie banks. The economy stagnated. Their debt to GDP was worse than any other country in Europe. And they wasted about 8 years of economic development. As painful as it was, Latvia reacted very quickly, decisively, and is much better for it today. The public didn't complain. It was quite remarkable. People understood it, people accepted it, and dealt with it. The same is true a few years later. So after Lehman Brothers collapsed, that was when I was involved in restructuring Parex. I moved to London, worked around Europe, and I came back and I was offered an opportunity to build Luminor, which is a bank I'll talk about in a minute. And when I came back after 6 years, I was surprised. I'd also gone to restructure Cyprus. Cyprus was in really bad trouble, and a lot of the money laundering clients from Latvia went to Cyprus. So then I went to Cyprus, and I saw the same people there that I just kicked out of Latvia. And so when I went there, they all went back to Latvia or the Baltics. It was incredible. You just can't catch them. And hence, partially due to that, but it was quite, it really is a disease that kills the reputation of any good economy. When I went back to start Luminar 6 years ago, you might recall there was a very big AML crisis where there was one bank, ABLV, which got into trouble. Then there was all the large Scandinavian banks also got in trouble, Danske, Swedbank, SEB, for the most part. This really was a huge threat to the reputation of the economy and the ability of people and the interest of people to invest there. And at the time, Latvia 3 years ago, it wasn't that long ago that Latvia was at risk of becoming on the gray list of countries in terms of financial crime risk, being almost sanctioned as a country by the U.S. But as the ambassador mentioned this morning, it's done a complete turnaround from being a place where and this includes Estonia as well, a region where it was easier for people to do this type of business than elsewhere, to one that's really a leader now in battling financial crime. And of course, it's not always pleasant for clients to have to fill out a lot of forms, but in the end, I think it's really paid off. So I think, but again, it was very quick. It was without hesitation. I think other countries could learn from this example. And again, the COVID response. I was living in London at the time, where the UK was a complete mess with the COVID response. Prime ministers having parties and things, and in Latvia, the response was very swift. You can argue whether it was the right thing to do or not in terms of lockdowns and shutting the border, but it was highly admired at the time. Again, decisive action by the government at the time. And similarly, the Latvia and the Baltic countries generally reacted very positively, very openly, consistently in terms of the Ukraine response. I'm concerned about what Poland has done in recent days, in terms of almost using their supply of arms as leverage in a grain negotiation, which I think is, excuse if anyone here is from Poland, excuse me, but I think it's not really forgivable under the situation. Those are two separate things. So, but Latvia and the Baltics, I think, have been very consistent partners to Ukraine, to the security framework of NATO, and the European Union in general. So that's just a kind of a very brief overview. Some of the things where professionally I was able to observe coming in and out of Latvia over the last 15, 20 years. So when I came back after working in other markets, I was approached to set up a new bank, which didn't have a name at the time. It was just a project, and they said, look, a bank called it a DNB, which is the largest bank in Norway, Nordea, which is one of the largest banks in Scandinavia in general, if not the largest. Didn't have enough scale in any of their 3 Baltic markets. So they wanted to consider, they were trying to also exit. It wasn't a core market for them. They wanted to focus on Sweden or Norway, and just didn't have enough time to bother with relatively small markets. And they had trouble exiting individually. You know, some people say that they were trying to sell. There's a concept called book value. When you value banks, it's basically, if you don't want to write anything off, you don't want to crystallize the loss, you sell it at book value. They were getting half of book value, so something like 500 million euros, or for both banks, trying to sell them separately, trying to exit the market. So they said, what if we put these assets together, and 1 + 1 will equal 3. So some very smart investment bankers from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and BCG, a consulting firm, they invited me to a meeting with these advisors who said, look, it's so simple. You just take, this bank, you put it together with this, there are synergies, you'll get the market, you'll reduce costs and make lots of money. If anyone ever offers you the opportunity to merge 6 banks in 3 countries, say no. It's 6 years on, and I'm still working on it. The original plan, I think, was 18 months, and beware of advisors. They're afraid to call me these days. But we did get on it, and it did make sense. And in the end, I have to say that the theory panned out, because we ended up selling the bank a year later to Blackstone for book value. So basically, by merging the assets in the region, we actually did double the value of it just by virtue of doing that. And then now we're working very intensively with Blackstone to finish the integration and keep moving forward with it. I think one of the points I also want to reiterate that came up earlier today, and Alex from Printful mentioned it as well, who I have the honor of working on the board with, is that people in the region really like to work for international companies. So creating a Baltic integrated bank was much easier than I expected. The common language is English. We integrated all the IT. We used to have 3 banks, which, a supervisory council in each country, a management board in each country. We now have 1. So legally, operationally, and also front office integration happened because the markets are similar enough in terms of what products are demanded for it to make sense. And the one point I want to make here is that, I'll make this at the end again, but we should talk about spotlight on Latvia, but as the headquarters of the Baltics, maybe, right? Because it has to be a Baltic region. I think some of the other speakers mentioned that earlier. It's either Baltic or global or nothing, So, and here, so we should always keep that in mind. And if you're investing for that market, for those customers, you really have to have a Baltic strategy to succeed and be profitable. You could see what the predecessors of Luminor tried to do, and it wasn't really possible for them. So yeah, we built a substantial institution. By merging the bank, making it bigger, we also increased our capacity to borrow at much lower interest rates. We actually issued a bond before the ECB started raising interest rates. We issued a bond at negative interest rates. So people were paying us to borrow money from them at one point, because our balance sheet was big enough. We had, instead of having 5 billion in each country, we had a balance sheet of 15 billion, and a very good rating, which has gone up over the years. So scale matters, integration matters. I think working across the Baltic region is easier than some people might think, and recruiting people is easier in an international business than it is in strictly a local business. So from an ambition point of view, to the point that Alex mentioned earlier and others, people want to work in an environment where they can work in a larger company, in a larger market, and it's better for their personal development and their value in the end, right? So I think from that point of view, the business has been quite successful. We've, the IT integration is something I wouldn't advise anyone to do again, but we're almost finished. and I think, again, we're also creating a bank which most of our large competitors are based in Sweden or Scandinavian countries, where actually the products and demands and the needs of the customers are still quite different than those in the Baltic countries. So we're hoping that by being local, being able to react more quickly, make decisions locally, provide only those products that really people need in the Baltics, we'll be able to get our fair share of the market and also be a better bank for the customers there. So that's the vision. So far, Blackstone's been very patient. We've had to deal with COVID. They invested in the middle of the AML crisis, and then to convince them to invest, I think we reviewed over 1 trillion transactions, historical ones, to make sure there's nothing funny. But they did it, and and I think it's a fact that's not really that well publicized. But this is the largest fund in the world, largest private equity fund. And Luminar is one of their biggest investments in Europe. It's 1.2 billion pure equity. When private equity invests, they usually borrow 2/3 of the money that they invest. But this is pure equity. In a bank, you can't do leveraged buyouts. So it's in a normal manufacturing company, it would be 3 billion if you leveraged it. So it's a significant investment, a very big testimony to the market. And I think one of the things they've also seen, and as we transform the bank, and I just picked one slide out of our economists' 80-page economics deck, which I think shows that the white-collar export capacity also of Latvia is going up substantially and exponentially. So this, further to what Minister Karinč said this morning, it's quite clear that as we move forward and as we invest in priorities in education and elsewhere, it really is the highly skilled labor force, sciences, technology, where we should focus. And because in the end, we will never have the number of people to be able to do highly manual tasks as competitively as other, much larger countries also who can now do things virtually. So we shouldn't aspire to be an outsourcing center in the long term. It's got to be building these unicorns. And I think, as we saw with the Printful story, it's amazing. Again, very substantial investment, $120 million invested into Printful. By a substantial U.S. fund, Sagemount, and so the vote of confidence is there. I hope we, next time we meet or you have at this conference or a year from now, that there should be more unicorns on the way. I think in terms of what to close on. I think before I get into some of the specific issues in Latvia, one of the other jobs I have is I recently started a job as the chairman of a bank called Privat Bank in Ukraine. When I was speaking about Latvia 30 years ago, when I was trying to organize that conference, and in a pretty awkward situation, I think they're going through a much larger scale conflict with Russia than we ever did recently. And it's truly inspiring to see how dedicated the people are there to working. And in terms of the Baltic states and Latvian involvement there, I think it's extremely. I think we also have a commitment and an obligation to look at ways that we can help them professionally. I think once the conflict and this invasion is over, Ukraine is going to be a different place. The corruption is being really sorted out in a fairly draconian way. They jailed the Supreme Court justice. They've made some very bold moves recently. They jailed. I'm suing one of these oligarchs for about 3 billion euros in London, and they put him in jail a few weeks ago. So they're really going after criminals, people who've stolen money, and I think they also realize that to accede to the EU, to accede to NATO, just like Latvia did, they're going to do what it takes. So I think people should also consider this in their plans. I think the Baltic countries and Latvia are very welcome in Ukraine, and then it should be part of our strategy. And hopefully someday we can say it's a domestic market. Right now it's a common front in some ways, which is why I'm very happy to be able to help them with what they need to do. I think in terms of what Latvia needs to do, I won't repeat the investments in education, healthcare, and defense. I think the education investment probably was much less than it should have been historically with hindsight. But I think hopefully today with partnerships and the work that the technical university is doing with MIT and other initiatives like that, those things can be accelerated these days. So hopefully we haven't lost too much time. But Riga and Latvia have become an education center also to foster this investment and also to avoid losing the best minds in the long run. Legal system reform also has to continue. When I left Parex Bank, the last day of my job, I filed a claim against the former owners for, I think it was 120 million euros, and we won the case a few months ago. This was 12 years ago. It took 12 years for a pretty, clear case where, the government also is the beneficiary to go through the courts. So I think ultimately it seems that the right decisions are made, but something still has to be done on judicial reform to make sure that this works more smoothly. And I also hope that, we don't get dragged into the populism, which we've seen recently in Poland in recent days. I would say even in the Baltics, that there's also been this move to tax banks in Lithuania. When I'm talking about foreign investor perceptions, for example, Blackstone invested in the bank 3 years ago, 4 years ago. There was COVID, there was Ukraine, there was AML, inability to pay dividends. There was a dividend restriction. They put up with all of that, and then once there's a sort of a short-term uptick in bank profits because of interest rate hikes, people are talking about taxing it because it's too much income. But that's not really fair to the investors. So Estonia is taking a different approach than Lithuania and just saying, please pay out the money, pay out your retained earnings and pay the taxes, and which makes a lot of sense. So hopefully we avoid these short-term anomalies and keep going the steady route, which I alluded to in the beginning, which has really led to a very solid, I would say well-administrated, regime with a good tax regime, predictability, security, being conscious about reputational issues, a work ethic which I haven't seen anywhere else. When I was running Coopers and Lybrand and PwC, my Scandinavian colleagues were getting mad at us for working too hard because we would call them on weekends and make more money. So, but it's truly inspirational to be involved in the Baltics. And I think we have to keep up the persistence. I think this event and events like it are critical. The framework is there. There's a lack of communication. Alex Saltonstall, he's so excited about Latvia that, he asked me if he could start singing in the Boston Latvian choir. So Alex, thanks for that. They need a good baritone. Good luck. and we need to keep getting the message out. Let more people know about the opportunity. So thank you, Laudis. And let's also look at it as a Baltic market. We can use that. Our Luminor is headquartered in Estonia legally, but we have all of our board meetings in Riga. So, virtually, and I think practically, Riga is a natural place for the business to be centered. And let's make the most of it. And thank you very much. It's very, very great to be here today.
All right, we're here. Long day, good day, productive day. I've got you for 3 more minutes, and then we go out that door, and there's $2,000 worth of booze that you guys can have before they go to a cash bar. So avail yourselves of it. A couple of quick things, though, before we go. And I guess the first is, of course, if you didn't get your selfie with the president earlier today, Nils is available for the next 20 minutes or so. And as he said, and I would utterly tip my cap to him. He's on a plane soon because he has to get to a meeting in Kiev on Monday. Ain't easy to get to Kiev these days. So I think the work that he described that he's doing on behalf of the Ukrainians, but by extension the Latvians and the Baltics broadly, is something that utterly deserves our respect and admiration. So I'd ask you to join me in a round of applause for Neil. All right, here, November the 1st, December the 6th, mini spotlights. If you're not already signed up or on the distribution list, please do so. All of the cool kids are going to be there. I don't know what the subjects are yet, but as you heard earlier today, we want them to be an hour-long, impactful, educational, relevant, timely, actionable, everything you would want, talking about Latvian firms coming to the US firms looking to go to Latvia. Please sign up, and I think you'll find them of extraordinary value. Believe it or not, even though it's 18 months from now, we've already started to think about the next spotlight. So if you're of the kind that would want to put this in your calendars, please do so. Friday, March the 21st, 2025, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Themes are still very much to be determined, but Latvia, ironically, has developed a pretty good relationship with Michigan. There's a strong Latvian community there. The governor of Michigan, who's actually one of the candidates, possibly if Biden doesn't run for the Democratic candidate, Governor Whitmer is actually a strong candidate. She's been to Latvia in the last 6 months. Latvia's defense minister was just there, so it's a pretty cool place, I think, for Latvia and the states to come together. And of course, volunteers are welcome. If you haven't already hit the QR code, please do so. And I would say this, if you found today to be helpful, if you found events like what we did here over the last 36 hours to be something that's worthwhile, join us. We could certainly use your help. We could certainly, I think, provide you an opportunity to get to do more of what we've done today. And I know we could certainly use you to be part of the team. So please do come join. Thanks as well to sponsors, as we talked about earlier today, both Platinum, Gold, and Amber. And I want to say this to 5 people in particular, and I'd ask you again for a round of applause at the end, without whose help today would never have come to fruition. The first is Christine Twidwell, who is the new executive director of the LACC, and today played such a key role in making this all possible. So I'd ask you to thank you. I'd also like to say thank you to Shelby Little of the Riga Business School. So Shelby's from Phoenix originally, has no ties to Latvia. Went there 8 years ago, whatever it was, on a whim almost. I think he lost a bet. And is there 5 years later, having learned the language to become a Latvian. So I tip my hat to you, Shelby. You've done a great job. So thank you. I would also say thank you to Christine Smilgavlia, whose help since I've been part of this organization has just been extraordinary. It's an interesting opportunity. She's also part of what I think is Latvia's best course. So if you know nothing about singing, and Alex, opportunity, talk to Christine. She knows what she's doing. Really good stuff. So Christine. I'd also like, and this would be an extended thank you to Gint Zadraks, who's not here today. Gint's worked with the Latvian embassy in DC for 3 years. His time came up, so he's returned to Latvia. But he had been an integral part of everything that we've done along the way. And I think it was Gint's the one who arranged for us to meet with Kristaps Porzingis about 18 months ago. So if you want to get hooked up with KP, you got to talk to Gint's, because apparently I've got no juice. I tried, but nothing there, guys. I'm sorry. And last but most certainly not least is, I know it's been brought up a couple times already, but I want to relay my personal thanks and gratitude to Kaspars Roškāns. Leah has been an utterly indispensable partner to the organization. Everything we've done here today and over time has been hand in hand with Leah, and we wish Kaspars nothing but the best. So where are you, Kaspars? Please stand up, and let's give Kaspars a hand. All right, this is it, last page. As I said, when we wrap up, go out, grab a drink. The bar's open at 7:15. Again, we've got $2,000. At some point, we go to a cash bar. So whatever you do, don't go between a bunch of Latvians at a free bar. So call to action. And I think Mikis was the one who put this sort of call to action together, and I'd like to reiterate it. And I think over the course of the past 12 hours or whatever it's been, we have heard plenty of stories, plenty of personal anecdotes. We've heard from plenty of panelists and firms and people that I think offer more than a compelling reason to why you should look at and consider developing a closer tie with Latvia. So hire Latvian, buy Latvian, invest in Latvia and Latvians. And for those who don't speak Latvian, at the bottom basically means Latvia can. We can do this. So please, Latvia var. Paldies visiem.